Welcome again, and thank you for joining our global webinar day here at Infosim. Our topic today is STABLENET 8.0, a small revolution for management and orchestration. My name is Dietmar Kneidl. I'm Director of Sales Europe with Infosim and will be your moderator. Joining us from our headquarter office here in Würzburg is my colleague, Dr. David Hock, our Director of Research. David has been with us for about 3 years now. He has a doctor's degree in computer science, and before joining Infosim, he worked as a research assistant and postdoc at the chair of communication networks at the Institute of Computer Science here in Würzburg. So, good afternoon to you, David, and welcome to today's webinar.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome.
All right. Before I hand over things to David, just a couple of household items. First off, when you're joining the webinar, all of you are automatically on mute, just to keep down the background noise. If you have any questions, please type them in the questions window at the bottom of the GoToWebinar application, and we'll be taking care of all those questions during the webinar. We have a couple of people in the background who can answer more technical questions, and of course the most interesting questions, or the tricky ones, we're gonna put into the Q&A session, which is gonna be at the end of the webinar. So please don't hold back. If you have a question, just type it in the chat box. This event is being recorded, so everybody who has registered for the webinar, including of course everybody who is here in the audience room, will get an email with a link to the recording. And that's pretty much all from my end so far. So I'm going to hand over control to our presenter, Dr. David Hock. David, it's your show.
Thank you very much, Dietmar. So welcome again, and let's start right away with a quick look at the agenda. So in this webinar, I will first give a really brief overview of the new features in STABLENET 8.0 in general, and then I will particularly address two new main features of STABLENET: tagging and grouping, unlimited dynamic structure, as well as unified visualization, cross-vendor, cross-layer, cross-service. Then I will quickly talk about STABLENET 8.0 in action, and we will end with questions and answers. So let us start directly with a quick overview of new features in STABLENET. So in STABLENET we have several new features, first of all starting with the features that I will explain later on in this talk, tagging and grouping, as well as the unified service visualization. Besides that, we also extended our VMware and ESX support. In particular, we are including the newest version of ESX in the VMware 6.5, as well as we did several improvements for improved scalability, further improved scalability and large installations. In addition, we have several other new features that I will not cover in detail here, but those are among other features addressing visualization and illustration purposes. So we have improved weather maps with a new graph library used in the backend, which gives a lot more possibilities in the weather maps area. We have extended dashboards with new widgets, and we also that is maybe a point to say thank you to our customers with all their helpful input. We listened to your input and we also improved our usability again. We took your feedback and put this into the new version. So now let us directly move to one of the main new features in STABLENET 8.0 that makes this a small revolution for management and orchestration. And actually I want to start talking about tagging and grouping with a quote of our CTO Marius Heuler. So about 1.5 years ago in Intercom's magazine issue 25, Marius said that our new tagging concept is a small revolution to the way that data can be handled for management and orchestration. By that time back, he was asked as a CTO what is the vision that he sees that would be coming, and I'm happy that now I will be able to present tagging and grouping to you. So let me start this explanation with a short metaphor. So imagine that you want to cook something, guests are supposed to come, and you have eggs and flour and maybe some other ingredients, and obviously out of these ingredients you can cook a lot of different recipes. So first of all, you could bake some cake, but you could also do the breading for some meat or tofu or fish or whatever you want to put inside the breading. And there are also, it's not just the ingredients that are common, but you are using the same kitchen. You might be using the same sort of tools in a different way for the different recipes. And for all that, you don't have 5 different kitchens and I don't know how many different tools and ingredients, but you are using one sort of ingredients to cook different recipes. So now let me put this analogy to the NMS space, to network management systems. So in the same way as you have a lot of different recipes that you want to cook, you also have a lot of different use cases that you want to cover in network management systems. So first of all, this could start with service-oriented use cases. So maybe you want to have a look at a particular type of services in your network because you want to do provisioning for those services, or you want to do performance management tasks, capacity planning based on the data you have. Or there might be other use cases where you might be rather device oriented. So maybe you want to see all devices of a certain vendor and model and be able to do updates to those devices. So you want to have a direct drill down to this particular type of device and model. And this is not something you are statically using all the time for the same device and vendor and model combination, but this is dynamically changing to the tasks you are doing right now. Another thing could be geo-oriented use cases. So maybe one day you are taking care of something happening in Italy, and the next day you want to look in Germany, and yet another day you want to look at the UK. So you need to have a possibility to dynamically filter to the particular location that is now of your interest, and this is not something that can be once statically configured, but it needs to be highly dynamic. I could continue this list for a long time, so maybe one last example would be customer-oriented use cases. So let's imagine you get a call from a customer and you directly want to drill down in that particular area of the customer and see what is affected and what could possibly be the devices that impact this customer's quality. So you have customer-oriented use cases here. And what is common for all these use cases is they share common data. So you have ideally, you should have one source of data, one network management system where you have the device data, the service data, all the measurements, and this should be usable for the different use cases. I didn't even mention cross-functional use cases where we are combining services, devices, and maybe look at all services in a special location for a certain customer with particular devices. So you could arbitrarily combine this. So summing up, we see that we have a lot of different subsets of data our customers are working with. We have a lot of different functionality they want to use based on this data. We have different visualization, tree structures, dashboards, analyzers. So there are a lot of different use cases here. However, the problem is that the underlying data must stay consistent and universally valid. I don't want my personal view that I'm preparing to do my use case impact the views of my several hundred other colleagues or several tens of other colleagues that are working with the same thing. I don't want them either to influence my layout, so I want to have my layout dynamically on what I'm working with, or my group layout for the team of people I'm working with, without impacting the underlying data and without changing their universally validity. So what I actually need is an unlimited dynamic structure that is offering an intuitive and automated way for grouping and filtering to adapt to all those possible use cases. And this is where our solution offered with StableNet-8, unlimited dynamic structure, comes into play. So the main idea of unlimited dynamic structure is can shortly be summarized as tagging and grouping, and what it is actually all about is you are tagging elements, and those elements are not just devices but equally services, weather maps, backups, also measurements, so all sorts of elements in the network management system. You are tagging those with tag categories. There are more than 200 predefined tag categories, so it's not something you need to do manually, but a lot of it can be done by discovery, by REST API in an automated way. And you can also add customizable tags. And once this tagging is done, you can use this for filtering to focus on the most relevant information. You can use it for grouping to, for instance, prepare trees that are grouped through a certain of the tag categories that you chose. And obviously this also improves your searching in the system, and it improves the overall handling and workflows and processes. So before talking too much longer about that, I thought that maybe we could have a real quick live demo here to just briefly show you the power of tagging and grouping. So I will actually jump into one of our StableNet demo systems here. And actually the view that I start with is focusing on a normal default measurement tree as you know it from the previous StableNet version. So this will still be available and looks the same. But now let's just look at one of the devices. So here this tree is, in this case, is structured according to some company structure. So we have Infosim, we have our headquarter. Inside the headquarter we have the router lab, and there is a router called Berlin. So now you see that this structure is a fixed structure that is statically configured, but maybe now I have a use case where I actually want to see all routers that are of the same vendor and model type as this router Berlin. So now with the new tagging, I have the possibility to choose different trees, and those trees here are just those that we configured for this demo case, but in the backend there is the possibility to configure much more trees. So now I jump to a vendor model device tree, and actually now I see the same devices, but I see them structured by vendors, by models, and then I see that my Berlin router is one of our 36440 chassis Cisco routers that we have here in our lab. So all this data that is used here for structuring this tree is coming from automated tags readout during the discovery, so there's no manual work needed here, but I can just use it right away. Another thing that I want to show here, maybe I just show that we also have measurements below it, and actually the measurements can then be grouped by type. So all this can be configured as arbitrary tag trees based on all the different tag categories that are available. So now let me briefly show a second example. I will jump to the category statistic, and here we will actually, now let's say we are particularly interested in the availability of our devices. So let's now not look at all the other measurements we are taking, but let's look at the availability, so the ping measurement, and let's say we actually want to see that for device for the different vendors. So here you see all the more than 200 predefined categories, and now I choose the device vendor, and I actually see here now the status of the different devices by vendor, and the number here indicates the number of devices I have per vendor. So now let me maybe further group this. I want to see the different models and how well available the different models are. So let me group this by device models. So now I actually see that I have 9 different device models for Cisco, 2 for HP, 3 for Juniper, and so on. And maybe for those who are familiar with Excel and like to work with pivot tables, you can also open a matrix that is basically showing this in a similar way as Excel pivot tables would do. So you have on the one side you have the different vendors, on the other side you have the different models with their name, and you always have a status indicator that is actually indicating the status, the worst status of one of those models for this vendor. And this is not static, but this is all dynamically based on the tags we are using. So with this, I will jump back to my presentation. And actually, summing up tagging and grouping, those are 3 simple steps. First of all, it's tagging. And as I pointed out, you can customize it a lot and put manual tags, but most of it can be done fully automated by discovery, by REST API, by getting the data in automatically. Then the second step is grouping and filtering. So you can arbitrarily group and filter the data based on the tags that you have, and this improves finding as well. So this is an overall benefit, and hopefully you enjoy it. So before jumping to the second topic of this webinar, I just briefly want to address one point for those customers that are already working with previous versions of StableNet, I thought maybe it is good to know that there is a seamless installation upgrade from StableNet 7 to StableNet 8. So it's not setting up a new system, but you can just upgrade it seamlessly. The tagging usage is included without additional license requirements, including 100 tag categories that you can use. About 60 of those are predefined with values that we assigned according to best practice and according to existing StableNet 7 categories, and about 40 of those are completely customizable. There's an automated conversion of StableNet 7 categories to corresponding StableNet 8 tags. And there's an automated conversion of the existing tree structure to the new tag trees. So summing up, we have common data, a lot of different use cases, and we can use our Egg and Flower to realize all these use cases with unlimited dynamic structure. So now, let me come to the second main feature that makes StableNet 8.0 a small revolution for management and orchestration. The unified visualization cross-vendor, cross-layer, cross-service. Again, I want to start with a metaphor. So let's imagine that you quickly want to oversee the situation of those M&Ms that you see on the picture on the left side and on the right side. And imagine that I'm asking you to count them, to tell me if there are more yellow M&Ms or more blue M&Ms or more orange M&Ms. And now imagine that one group has to do it with the left side and one with the right side. I think all of us agree that there might be the same items here, but there's a significant impact of the structure and the visualization on the ease of counting, comparing, and so on. If it's well structured, like here on the right side picture, I can easier count it, I can easier compare if it's the same amount of items for all different colors, and so on and so forth. And now getting again to the NMS analogy, if you want to quickly oversee a multi-layer service, obviously you can use the traditional approach of looking up the service definitions of your services, how they are defined and related to each other in CMDBs and spreadsheets and some other formats that you have. You can then model those services, but best practice shows that even though there are standardized models like TM4 TOSI, often there are vendor-specific implementation of those that differ in practice. So you have to take care of that. Then if you have the modeling and the definition of your services, you are interested in the status of the services as well as in the status of the devices that are endpoints of those services. So you need to jump back and forth maybe in a zoo of element management systems and network management systems to log into consoles, open different graphical user interfaces, possibly of different vendors. And if you finally have all that data together, then you want to visualize it. So often you need to apply some homegrown visualization in the sense that you need to use manual graph editors. For instance, Visio is a great tool for visualization, but still you have to do manual effort to put everything in a layout as you want it to look like, and then it's all based on a static display. It's not dynamically reacting to the status of your network. And so now this is the one side. These are the M&Ms that are not well sorted. And on the second side, wouldn't it be nice to have a unified service visualization that is taking care of all that, collapsing the data, offering one unified visualization? So summing up, there are different tools, different NMSs, different EMSs to look at. There are different layers. Let it be a pseudo wire, let it be VPNs, IP, Ethernet layer, physical layer. There are a lot of different layers involved. There are different vendors, so there are various sources of information. You can find out everything you need from the way how it is right now and use these different tools on different layers and so on. However, time is money. And what you actually want is a complete overview of the network and the possibility to quickly track and fix problems without having to jump back and forth in this zoo of management systems. You actually need a unified visualization of the services across all vendors and layers. And that is where our solution included in StableNet 8, Unified Service Visualization, comes into play. So what we are first doing is we are doing consolidation of information cross-layer, cross-vendor, cross-service. We are modeling it in one unified service model, including sub-services and the relation between the services, so that this can be used in the next step for visualization of services, including their status and their relationship. Based on this, we offer a direct drill down from the visualized service structure to the particular point of interest, so that you can still do a drill down without jumping back and forth in the systems and directly get to the point. All this is done fully automated through Discovery and REST API. So there is obviously an editor to enter services manually as well, but normally in a large network with a lot of services you want to automate this, and this is fully possible in StableNet 8. So now again let me quickly jump to StableNet and give a real quick live demo on that part. So here we are back in the same graphical user interface as before, and I jump to the inventory here and I directly go into the service analyzer. So I want to start with the service view, and I actually want to pick a service here. Let's make this a little bit larger. And actually here we see a service on the top layer, as well as the realizations on the lower layers of the sub-services. So this is with drill down, so I can collapse it and open it again. I can also further open it down here to see what is below. So you see that I directly have all the different service information here in one visualization. I also have a table view up here that actually indicates everything that is shown. So if I close it, I just have this service on the top layer. And this is, by the way, I also have an SVG export, so if I want to have it later on as a scalable vector graphic to further edit it manually, I can also do that. Yes, and I also have a possibility to show this on a neighborhood view. So here we see it on a logical view, how the service is built, but maybe I want to know where the service is located in my network infrastructure. So now if I jump to the neighborhood view, I actually see here that I see the top layer of the service indicated by the two highlighted nodes and the link in between, but I also see the lowest layer connections, how they are routed to build the service. So this visualization is not so easy to read if you see it the first time, but it especially contains all the different information on how this service is going. We also have here a lot of different colored dots that actually indicate different connections between the different sites on different layers. So here we have a possibility to show all this in one view. And finally, I will jump to the neighborhood view. And here again, I see my inventory tree. I will jump again to my vendor model device tree that I used before, and I will go back to my Berlin router. And actually now I want to see the one hop neighborhood from Berlin, let's say first on the Ethernet level. So here I see that there are 3 neighbors on the Ethernet level. And now maybe also LSPs, MPLS, label switch path. So here I see in a second color, I see additional links popping up, and the legend is actually indicating to me that the red dots indicate Ethernet connections and the green dots LSPs. So maybe I will end the live demo at this point and get back to StableNet, to my presentation. So summing up the unified service visualization, there are again 3 simple steps. Consolidating the data out of the different models, the different service definitions, getting the statuses and relationships of the services, then modeling it and visualizing it in a unified model and visualization, and hopefully this again improves your daily work. So we have a cross-layer, cross-service, cross-vendor consolidation of data to understand status and relationship of services. And we have a drill down to the particular layer of interest. So before getting to Q&A, I want to quickly have one more point in my presentation here. StableNet 8.0 in action. So what have we seen in action in this webinar? We have seen tagging and grouping. I showed one example for a new tree based on tag categories. We have seen the category analyzer for different vendors. We have seen hierarchical service analyzer, a hierarchical service analyzer view, and we have seen a topological service analyzer view. And obviously there is a lot more that I would want to show and that we could show, but due to the limited time, and we want to stick more or less to this half an hour time of this webinar, we actually thought that it might be better to invite you to a particular webinar that is covering the technical aspects of StableNet's new features, and I would be happy to invite you to join my colleague Vlad Sinjor-san next week to get different use cases for tagging and grouping as well as for unified service visualization.
All right, maybe I'll just add a point here. I've just copied the registration link for this webinar, which is actually more like a workshop. It's a 1-hour session that you can register for, of course, free of charge. It's going to happen around 3 o'clock, no, at exactly 3 o'clock next week, so pretty much the same time this webinar, so it's next week, Thursday. We're going to send out an invite for that webinar, I think next week, early next week, Monday or Tuesday, to all of you anyhow, but if you would prefer to register right now, just click on the link in the chat. All right, are we up for Q&A already, or is there anything?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
I think now it's Q&A. You have uploaded a handout already, Dietmar, did you mention that?
Oh yeah, thank you. So I've uploaded the slides we've been using, and so you can download them through the GoToWebinar panel. This is, of course, just a PDF version. And now let's dive into some more questions. A question that we've been asked a number of times, actually, I think 4 times in the last 30 seconds. When will this new version be publicly available? Maybe you can say something about that, David.
Yes, so we are currently in the last testing phase, last release candidates, and the release is coming around Easter, so about 2 weeks time from now.
I'm sorry, I was muted. No one told me, except for one. Thank you very much, audience. I have copied a link in the chat that will direct you to the page where you can sign up for a StableNet 8 or generally a StableNet release newsletter. So if you want to be informed the day StableNet is being released, just subscribe to this newsletter. So let me see, what other questions do we have? Oh, yes. Sorry, something we've been asked a number of times is how is this going to be affected? How are these new features going to be affected by the current StableNet license? So this is obviously a question from existing customers. So maybe, David, you can elaborate a little bit, especially on the tagging and grouping, but I think on the service or the new service analyzer as well. How are these features being handled by the license? Do customers need an upgrade, or how is this happening?
Yes, very good question. Thank you. So I covered this very briefly, but I'm happy to say a bit more about it. So tagging and grouping is an integral part of the new StableNet, so it's not possible to use it without it. So it's part of the normal license, and you directly get with it 100 tag categories included, what means that about 60 of those tag categories are used for things like the existing categories you have been using in StableNet 7 and some other predefined values that we propose according to best practices. And besides that, you have 40 customizable tags that you can freely use for any sort of information you want to put based on discovery, based on REST API integration. So there will be tagging and grouping for everybody in the new StableNet license. Regarding Service Analyzer, real quickly, if you had the Service Analyzer before, you will have it with the same license. There is no addition to it. More precisely, that means Service Analyzer is one of those features that is in StableNet Telco version. So if you are running StableNet Telco, you had the Service Analyzer before, and you will have the new version, the Unified Service Visualization, in this new version of StableNet.
Okay, well, thank you very much, David. Questions are dropping in quite fast right now. I'm not sure we can cover all of those in the Q&A session. There is one question about software as a service model, and yes, StableNet 8 will of course also be available as a software as a service model. So if you're interested in that, or in case, and I think we have a few of our SaaS providers in the audience, you will be able to upgrade to the new version. There's also been a question about what if we need more than 100 tagging categories. Well, I'm happy to say that in that case you need to talk to me or to your sales contact, and I'm sure we can help you with that as well. All right. I think we will probably follow up with all of the other questions manually or through email or phone right after the webinar, but that should not hold you back from typing in more questions. The session will be open for at least another 10 minutes, so if you have more questions, feel free to type them in. Again, we have qualified personnel. Now that the session is almost over, I can tell you that our CTO is in the background answering many of those questions. You probably won't like that, but he can't get away from his desk anyhow, so I'm not worried about that. Maybe advance another slide, David, if you please. Just the usual information that we have, of course, more information available on the website. It's not about StableNet 8 yet. That is going to change in the next 2 weeks. And if you need anything specific, then please let us know. We're happy to help. So again, the session is going to be open, but as for the presentation part of the webinar, David, thank you very much for all the insights. And I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. As I've mentioned before, we've recorded the webinar and going to make the recording available to you tomorrow with a short email. And again, the session is still open, so feel free to torture our CTO with more questions. I'm sure he likes that. And two more pieces of information from us. We've already mentioned the StableNet Technical Workshop next week, Thursday, April 6th. You can still find the link to register for that workshop in the chat. And the next global webinar date, just as a heads up, is going to be April 22nd, so in 4 weeks pretty much from now. Invite is going to be sent out in about 2 weeks, and the topic for that webinar most likely is going to be the Internet of Things and potentially our cooperation with Intel in that matter. Well, that's all from us, so thanks for joining. David, any final remarks? You're getting a little bit too comfortable in your chair, so anything you need to add?
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Okay, it's all fine. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening.
All right. Well, thanks again. Again, we're keeping the session open, but for those of you who haven't got any more questions, enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.